of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Jason Koebler of 404 Media joins us to talk about how best to resist the tech oligarchy. And later in the show, Nayna Gupta, policy director for the American Immigration Council, will be with us to talk about Trump's vicious anti-immigrant crackdown that's happening as we speak. Also on the program, Trump sends thousands more active duty troops to the southern border and instructs Border Patrol to deny all asylum seekers, which is illegal under both U.S. and international law. Flights for 10,000 refugees, largely from Afghanistan, Congo, Syria, Venezuela, is what people are guessing. All those flights have been canceled. Trump's DOJ will start criminal probes of any state or local official who resists mass deportation. What about small government? Remember those days? States' rights? 46 House Democrats join every Republican to vote to advance the Laken-Riley Act. It's sending it to Trump's desk now. In terrifying news that is not immigration-related, Trump has revoked an anti-discrimination executive order that has been in place since LBJ signed it in 1965. He also issued a directive demanding federal employees report on their colleagues if they resist anti-DEI moves. Tulsi Gabbard's DNI nomination may be in jeopardy over her meetings with Assad. Chris Butler is not going to be happy about these developments. Senate Democrats block a GOP bill that would have criminalized many abortion providers. In case you were wondering where the Republican Party stands on that, still trying to criminalize abortion. Vegas hotel workers end the longest strike in decades and reach a 5-year deal with Virgin Hotels. However, the Oregon nurses' strike is still going on, extending past 10 days, as negotiations with Providence Health stall. In LA, a new brush fire exploded in the Santa Clarita Valley yesterday. Tens of thousands more are under evacuation orders. And lastly, Israel has intensified its attacks on the West Bank after the ceasefire deal, killing at least a dozen Palestinians, and including a 14-year-old boy. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's what we call an M-Majority Report, and there is merch to that effect. Is that merch still available on the website, Bradley? Do we know? I have this hat here just to show it off, because I really am... This is perhaps the favorite merch that we've ever done. I can't wear it. It's too narcissistic. And, you know, my ego's big enough.
Available.
It is available.
It's still available.
In this cool charcoal. So check it out. shop.majorityreportradio.com. Also, I mentioned this just now in the headlines, but the 14-year-old boy that was killed, friend of the show, Jasper Nathaniel, has a piece on him, on this young boy who it came out, I guess, yesterday or 2 days ago. You can check it out. It's called Israel's Kill Zone Has Shifted to the West Bank. It's on his Substack, Infinite Jazz. You can see they talk about here, yes, the execution of a 14-year-old boy in a quiet West Bank town. The boy was named Ahmad Rashid Sholi, killed by Israel. Just another life ended by the Israeli government.
Al Jazeera had an interview, maybe we'll play this in the later in the show, of a VHS or NHS nurse, Victoria Rose, plastic surgeon, spent time working in Gaza. Quote, "I operated every day, and most of my list was children. We saw a lot of sniper injuries. The children seemed to be specifically hit by quadcopters. A lot of them were shot in the back, in the head."
I mean, there were those scans that were provided to the New York Times months ago, and the Times put it in their opinion section. Remember that? We'll have the mass rape story on the front page splash, which has a ton of holes. But let's put the stuff where we have literal physical evidence and testimonies of doctors about how many sniper bullets were to the head of these children. We'll put that in the opinion section.
We have that entire region in 4K from satellites. How much footage the American government is sitting on of IDF members just flying around these quadcopter robots with guns on and just shooting kids?
Oh my gosh.
And like it's tough to, like, you know, we've tried over the 15 months to convey and play some, well, we can't play all of the horrible images that get taken off of YouTube, but that's what's going on, is flying around toy helicopters with guns on them and shooting kids. That's what Israel's been doing for the last 15 months.
And that is my naivete, where I did think, you know, just the documentation of these atrocities, we couldn't do our equivalent of a Holocaust in 2023 and 2024. There's just too much available information. It's all live streamed. Well, turns out, even when the images are right in front of people, it doesn't change anything. And that is something that I think is such a dark thought that it's hard to sit with. But anyway, I was in a good mood until I started reading those headlines. Holy moly. Let's just dive into this here, because this is really important. So there are basically two main overarching, I think, themes and goals of this administration. The first is going to be a vicious immigration crackdown, and we're going to be speaking about that with our second guest in just a bit. But there's also the gutting of the administrative state. And yesterday, there were confirmation hearings for Russ Vought, who is the nominee for the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. He is the Project 2025 guy who was caught on that hidden camera, or I guess in that stunt. We played that a few months ago, working with conservative think tanks to come up with a fast-track plan to gut the administrative state, attack programs that help people, that keep people out of poverty, that keep people fed. And he has also talked about wanting, I think, to inflict pain or terror, trauma. That was the word. Thank you, Bradley. On federal workers. Because right-wing thought and right-wing populism, or whatever the hell they're branding it as, is about punching down. It's not, don't look up at the billionaires who are lining the seats sitting behind Donald Trump at his inauguration, doing a homage to a fascist salute, if we're being extremely charitable or protecting ourselves legally, from in front of the U.S. presidential seal. Don't look at the most powerful people. Look at federal bureaucrats who may piss you off. That's who Russ Vought is going to be targeting. And Senator Tim Kaine has been really good in these hearings. He's also, I think, incentivized to be aggressive here, because I was reading that 145,000 federal workers live in Virginia, right? Yeah. So, these are a lot of his constituents. We'll play this whole thing here. This is Kaine questioning Russ Vought about his comments about wanting to traumatize members of the federal workforce.
Mr. Chair, congratulations on the nomination, Mr. Vought. I want to go back to the comment that Senator Warner read to you. There's 140,000 federal employees in Virginia, and you gave a speech that got a lot of attention when you said, "We want bureaucrats to be traumatically affected when they wake up in the morning. We want them to not want to go to work because they are increasingly viewed as the villains." Now, I pay attention to the way people say things, because There's a million ways you can make a point. And the way you choose to make a point tells you something about the person. There's a wonderful, since I had an Old Testament reference over there, I'll go to a New Testament one, Luke 6:45. From the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. We want people to be traumatized. We want people to be traumatized. I've heard a million people in this room give speeches about we want to cut the budget, we want to reduce federal spending, want to deal with the deficit, but I haven't heard anybody give a gleeful speech about traumatizing the federal workforce. You don't want federal air traffic controllers going to the airport traumatized, do you, Mr. Vought?
No, Senator.
You don't want the people inspecting our food, our medicine, our infant formula as federal. You don't want them to go to work traumatized, do you?
No, Senator.
You don't want the people interdicting drugs at the border. You don't want them going to work traumatized, do you?
No, Senator.
And you don't want people who are working for you at the OMB, who many people would think, well, they're in the White House, they must be. You don't want them traumatized, do you?
No, Senator. Thank you for expanding on that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I felt like I had to, because I got 140,000 people, and most of them have families. And they're trying to do a good job. Was your comment about people being traumatized just focused on the federal workforce, or was it more broadly about state employees and local government employees too?
Senator, it was about the weaponized bureaucracy that unfortunately—
I'm going to get to weaponized in a minute, but you were talking about the federal workforce.
I was talking about the bureaucusy that I experienced and that have—
at the federal level.
Can you pause it, actually? I'm sorry. So—
He's just speaking his truth.
Yeah. God, I honestly, but this is the thing, and it's bothering me about this era of, there's no objective truth. It's just my truth that matters. And usually the people whose truth gets to break through are the wealthiest people, like Elon Musk, who's telling people, no, don't believe your lying eyes.
It's what I experienced.
Yeah, I mean, this is the worst of this postmodernist thing, and also therapy speak.
This. That's why they see it in their opponents so readily.
Right. It's just okay, because I can't really compete on the facts of what you've said, you have read a quote back to me, I'm going to make it about the bureaucracy. He was talking about workers, not the structure. The bureaucracy would be the structure.
And
you were talking about the
to
workers. Yeah, and you know it. I mean, Kane is laughing in his face, but just the attempt at the sleight of hand of saying, oh, no, the bureaucracy, not the workers. No, why would the bureaucracy be traumatized? And that's not what you said.
It's the same little chicken shit thing that, what's his name? The Fox News guy, Hegseth, said, oh, when I was on those bro podcasts and I was saying no women in combat roles,
yeah.
You didn't say jack about standards. But now all of a sudden you get in a suit in front of Congress and it's like, oh, I just meant standards. I don't know. I just know. Yeah, well, you were performing.
Right, little weasel.
I experienced and that have
at the federal level.
At the federal level.
You were not talking about state
I can't
employees.
speak. I have no experience with the state.
You were not talking about local employees.
Was not.
Your mother was a public school teacher, correct?
Yes, Senator.
So you were talking about you want the federal workforce to be traumatized.
Bureaucracy.
I like a lot of presidents. I'm a Lincoln fan. Are you a Lincoln fan?
Yes, Senator.
Lincoln spoke to a nation at war, and he said, with malice towards none and charity towards all. And he was saying that to the North and the South. He didn't say, we want you to be traumatized. He was a bridge builder and a unifier, and that's what public servants should be. They shouldn't gleefully be wishing trauma on people who are trying to serve their fellow man. I want to get to woke and weaponized. You were the president of the Center for Renewing America, and the think tank produced a 2023 budget proposal calling a commitment to end woke and weaponized government. Do you remember that?
Yes, Senator.
And that's the correct title?
Yes, Senator.
It's 104 pages of details to end woke and weaponized government. And it proposes deep cuts to the SNAP program. Is providing nutrition assistance to low-income kids woke and weaponized?
Senator, I'm not here to talk about the budget that the Center put out. I'm here on behalf of the President.
Yeah, but you just said you did that. I want to know what's woke and weaponized about providing food assistance to low-income kids.
Well, again, I'm not here on behalf of my center, on behalf of the President.
I know that, but this is your work product. I mean, you can say it's not woke and weaponized, or you can tell me why it's woke and weaponized. I don't think SNAP programs or benefits for kids are woke and weaponized. You agree with me?
When we refer to the federal government being weaponized, we're referring to bureaucracies that.
Okay, so you didn't include SNAP. You proposed to cut SNAP, but you're not saying it's woke and weaponized.
Again, I am not going to answer questions about the Center for Renewing
You
America's
propose
products.
deep cuts to Pell Grants.
Why not?
Is helping kids pay for college and helping their families, is that woke and weaponized?
Again, I'm not here to defend the Center for Renewing America's
I get
budget.
it.
Why is that acceptable?
Yeah.
Like all these, I'm not here to answer it. Like, no, I'm here to ask it to you. Answer me or get out of here.
Right. They're still hanging their hat on this plausible deniability about Project 2025 as if this wasn't written by all of the major conservative organizations, the Heritage Foundation, as if Vote, I can never say it right, Vote wasn't a previous member of the Trump administration, as if 140 members of the previous Trump administration, who are many of whom are, I think, a part of the plan going forward, didn't work on that. It's just so flimsy, but they don't care, and that they love being able to get away with it. But let's just finish just a minute more.
Is that woke and weaponized?
Again, I'm not here to defend the Center for Renewing America's
I get it
budget.
that you're not here to defend that work product, and I can understand why.
You can't even make an argument anymore, can you?
Deep cuts to Medicaid for millions of low-income families. Why is that woke and weaponized? You propose undermining health insurance. Why is that woke and weaponized? Eliminating tenant-based rental assistance. Why is that woke and weaponized? Eliminating the low-income housing energy assistance program. This was all in your document about ending woke and weaponized government. Okay, let's see. We want to traumatize federal employees, and then we want to take all these programs that help everyday people who are struggling and cut them because they're woke and weaponized. Those are your words, not mine. From the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. I yield back.
All right. Well, that's well done. That was well done. Because wokeness, it's just a substitute for everything. It's a panacea for Republican austerity and cruelty. That is exactly what the plan is. The plan is that, SNAP is woke because low-income minorities may use it.
Yep.
Rental assistance is woke because low-income minorities might use it. And in addition to what's coming around the bend, where they're going to attempt to extend and expand upon the Trump tax cuts for the wealthy that were disproportionately for the wealthy during Trump's first term. They're going to attempt to cut taxes for the rich. This is the Republican way. And then also, under this new brand of wokeness, attack the same programs that have always been their target of both racist animus and of just trying to loot the federal government so that it creates more desperation.
And it's our job to fast forward people to the realization that this is all bullshit and doesn't do anything. And a great way to do this is this law and I forget what LPE blog. I think it's Law, Politics, and Economics blog. But they quote tweet Andrew Ferguson, the new FTC guy, says, DEI is a scourge on our institutions. President Trump promised the American people that he would end it. He has done so in 3 amazing executive orders. Under my leadership, the FTC is doing its part to end the DEI plague. LP blog says, can't believe Lena Khan wasted 4 years banning junk fees, blocking harmful mergers, and reducing the price of inhalers when she could have been fighting against woke.
Right, exactly. I mean, and what happened to the admiration that J.D. Vance felt for Lena Khan? I mean, wow, he thought she was doing a phenomenal job, so phenomenal that they replaced her immediately with a guy who's going to go after wokeness.
Yeah, it went to the same place that J.D. Vance said, oh, yeah, obviously we're not going to pardon the guys who attacked cops on January 6th. And
Duh.
You know what? I kind of just want to get this out of my hair. I don't want to think about these pigs for longer than I need to.
Yeah, just let them out. Let them all out. Before we get to our first guest, a word from one of our sponsors, a sponsor that I started using even before they advertised for us, even before I started here at the Majority Report, Delete Me. Ever wonder how much of your personal data is out there on the internet for anyone to see? More than you think. Your name, your contact information, social security number, home address, even information about your family members are all being compiled by data brokers and sold online. We know this. We know this. We know that the big tech oligarchs are basically making money off of selling your data, and it's getting worse and worse by the year. Data brokers make profit off your data. Your data is a commodity. Anyone on the web can buy your private details. This can lead to identity theft, phishing attempts, harassment, unwanted spam calls. But now you can protect your privacy with Delete Me. When I decided, okay, I'm not going to go to law school, I'm going to do this crazy thing, I realized that I was becoming a somewhat public person, and I just had to worry about my personal information. And so I got Delete Me, and I've been using it really ever since 2018, 2017, something like that. And I can't recommend it enough. We want to thank our sponsor for today's episode, Delete Me. As I mentioned, I'm a person who exists publicly. And especially because I'm sharing my opinions online that can sometimes be controversial, I am hyper aware of safety and security. Looking into it. It's easier than ever to find personal information about people online. All of this data is hanging out on the internet, and it can have actual consequences in the real world. Sign up and provide Delete Me with exactly what information you want deleted, and their experts take it from there. Delete Me sends you a regular personalized privacy report showing what information that they found, where they found it, and what they removed. Delete Me is not a one-time service. Delete Me is always working for you, constantly monitoring and removing the personal information that you do not want on the internet. To put it simply, Delete Me does all the hard work of wiping yours and your family's personal information from data broker websites. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now at a special discount for our listeners. Today, get 20% off your Delete Me plan by texting MAJORITY to 64,000. Text MAJORITY to 64,000. That's MAJORITY to 64000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. All right, quick break. And when we come back, we are going to be speaking to Jason Koebler about big tech and what we are going to do about it. We are back, and we are joined now by Jason Koebler. Sorry for mispronouncing it a little bit earlier. Co-founder of 404 Media, previously the editor-in-chief of Motherboard, and also, if you go to our description below, 404 Media has a YouTube channel where you can check it out, youtube.com/@404 Media Co. Thanks so much, Jason, for coming on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, you wrote a piece about decentralizing big tech, and I want to get to that in just a bit, but I feel like I want to start with the TikTok ban because it's topical and because there's so many kind of moving parts in that story. I'm still, you wrote about this in your piece on this. Like, I don't understand why there's not more digging into the lobbying efforts by Meta on this TikTok ban to take out what could be, what's their largest competitor with Instagram completely, right? Like, what's the status of this ban? And what is your feeling about Meta's role in trying to get this over the finish line?
Right. I mean, TikTok's status in the United States is still very much up in the air. Trump has pushed the deadline to make a decision back The law does provide a way for him to do that, but it's unclear whether it provides this specific way. But if you notice, like TikTok is not in the either app store, either the iOS or Google Play Store. Right now, Oracle is hosting TikTok servers for American users. That is actually an outgrowth of an earlier executive order that Trump pushed in his first term. And right now, it seems like TikTok is sort of just existing, hoping that there's not going to be enforcement from the Department of Justice. But that could change really at any moment. Senator Tom Cotton has said that he really is upset about Trump, kind of giving them this lifeline. And so I think that the fact that TikTok did go off for a few hours over the weekend was a really chilling thing that, as an American and as an American tech reporter, we haven't seen a lot of in the United States. These are the types of decisions that a lot of authoritarian governments take all over the world. But in the US, we're sort of used to being able to access the entire internet, if you will. And so I think it is a warning for TikTok users, and especially the people who make a living on those platforms.
Certainly. And you mentioned in your piece on this that Meta did, it seems like, paid a firm called Targeted Victory to say publicly about how TikTok is dangerous to children, right? So they at the very least tried to have that PR out there. But it is interesting in terms of like, this ban, it was also the Israel lobby, we should be clear, was a big part of it as well. But the way that all of these tech oligarchs are kissing the ring with Trump and kissing his ass in this incredibly humiliating ritual where even Zuckerberg, it's like, I saw Matt Walsh saying, I don't believe this guy. They know what's going on here,
Sam
right?
Altman's turned a face.
Yeah, it's so brazen. But you just said Oracle and their servers. I want to play a little bit of this video of the founder of Oracle, co-founder Larry Ellison. Wait, that's his name, right? Gosh.
Yeah, Larry Ellison.
Yeah, I'm a little foggy here. Larry Ellison, because this is potentially one of the bidders that Donald Trump is setting up to buy TikTok. And like, that could be, or at least have a stake in it. That could be extremely concerning based on things like this.
The police will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording, watching and recording everything that's going on. Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. And it's unimpeachable. The cars have cameras on them. I think we have a squad car here someplace. But those kind of applications using AI, if we can use AI, and we're using AI to monitor the video. So if that altercation that occurred in Memphis, the chief of police would be immediately notified. It's not people that are looking at those cameras, it's AI that's looking at the camera. No, you can't do this. It would be like a shooting. That's going to be immediately, that's going to be an event that's immediately, an alarm is going to go off, it's going to be, and we're going to have supervision. In other words, every police officer is going to be supervised at all times. And the supervision will, and if there's a problem, AI will report the problem and report it to the appropriate person, whether it's the sheriff or the chief or whomever we need to take control of the situation. We have,
I think that's good. You get the sense that is him saying that AI and constant surveillance is going to make sure that we're a safer place and it's going to keep everybody in line. That is almost, taking a page right out of George Orwell's playbook and just making it reality.
This is already a reality in a lot of places in the United States. We've done a lot of reporting about this company called Fusus, which sells smart surveillance cameras that essentially allow police to tap into a large network of surveillance cameras at convenience stores, but also surveillance cameras that they themselves own. And it has things like object recognition. We've seen automated license plate readers proliferate all over the United States. And so, this future is very scary, but it's also one that's already here to some degree. And I think that when we talk about TikTok and a TikTok ban and worries about China spying on us, many American tech companies are violating our privacy all day, every day.
Right.
And there has been very little action by Congress to take any sort of, to make any sort of protections for American citizens. I think you brought up Mark Zuckerberg and Meta. Meta was obviously the biggest potential beneficiary of a TikTok ban because the sort of natural place to go is Reels. We saw Meta sort of roll out a lot of features to entice TikTok users to go over to Instagram. But when Congress has hauled Mark Zuckerberg in front of different panels over the years to talk about privacy violations and anti-competitive behavior and monopolistic behavior, Mark Zuckerberg has beat the drum that Chinese tech companies are the ones to fear, and and competition from Chinese tech companies sort of could put America's standing as the leader on the internet at risk. And I think that Meta has said that it has not directly lobbied on a TikTok ban, but Meta is the one that would benefit the most. And Zuckerberg has used China as this cudgel to prevent regulation of his own platforms for years.
And for a guy like Ellison getting in on this, somebody who is heavily invested in surveillance technology and is involved in contracts at the U.S.-Mexico border and other government contracts that we may not even know of, can you speak to what that would mean to have yet another social media behemoth controlled by a Trump sycophant and a right-wing ideologue, essentially? Because now Twitter, now Meta, all of our social and the Google CEO owns YouTube, was genuflecting at the altar of Donald Trump at the inauguration the other day, as was the TikTok CEO. So right. Even in these situations, we're basically seeing a complete conservative capture of our social media sites. And they raised hell about what they called censorship. It wasn't the case. But now it's resulted in them kind of winning this fight, which is scary for the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you talk about what if Larry Ellison or, there was reporting that maybe Chinese government wanted Elon Musk to buy TikTok, or maybe they would be open to that. I think TikTok is already more beholden to the Trump administration than anyone could possibly be, because they owe their entire existence in the United States, their status in the United States, to Trump looking the other way on what is already a law. And so, I mean, I do agree that it would be bad if one of Trump's friends in Larry Ellison took full control of TikTok in the United States. But we have TikTok throwing inauguration parties for Donald Trump. We have them thanking him, for saving TikTok on the app in a, push alert to millions and millions of users. And I think that at this point, I think that their status is a little bit different than, say, Mark Zuckerberg and Meta's status, because Mark Zuckerberg aligning himself with MAGA is more, cynical and perhaps like genuflecting, whereas TikTok sees it as like an existential risk, because at this point they exist in the United States because Trump happens to like them at this exact moment. And so you're absolutely right. Every major social media company now feels beholden to the Trump administration in some way. Some of them are controlled by people who are literally part of the government at this point. Doge is now formally a part of the government. You have Elon Musk, who is hopping around on stage with Donald Trump. And then you also have, obviously Mark Zuckerberg's sort of heel turn. So it's a big concern.
Yeah, and I guess I'm wondering what, as somebody who studies this and knows more about big tech certainly than myself, from the outside, it really does feel to me like over the past few years, Meta, other tech companies, Google, right, even Google less so perhaps, but Meta in particular, they've reached basically the end point in terms of services that they can provide for people, right? I mean, they were under an antitrust investigation for allegedly, now that's probably going to be dropped because Lena Khan is gone, but purchasing Instagram and WhatsApp 10, 15 years ago at inflated prices higher than their market value in order to crush competition. But now basically there are these giant companies that have to try to grow in some way. Endless growth is the goal under capitalism, even though it's impossible. And I feel like they've bumped up against a practical reality of what they can provide other than just selling people's data. And so this Zuckerberg heel turn really feels like a way for him to protect this kind of giant pile of money that he has within Meta, but without, I guess, expanding the company in any practical way. He's going to have to rely on essentially buying off the government in order to maintain tech status and Meta's status in the world and in its size.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg had one great invention in Facebook many years ago, and all of the innovation that company has done since has been either ripping off its competitors and not facing any consequences, or buying its competitors and not facing any consequences. The metaverse was lighting money on fire. It didn't work. And now, Meta is shoving artificial intelligence into all of its products, like many other tech giants are as well. And I think that's sort of where I think protecting the platforms that he has by cozying up to the Trump administration, and then also trying to extract as much value from artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence slop and spam that's taken over these platforms, is Meta's strategy at this point. I watched a recent shareholder meeting, and Mark Zuckerberg was talking about how they imagine a future where there's artificial intelligent bots and accounts sort of interacting with people. I mean, you can argue about whether that's social media at all. I would argue that it's not.
Anti-social media?
Yeah. But one thing that Meta has rolled out that I think has been underreported, and that is really interesting to me, is that they're allowing advertisers to use generative AI to make a bunch of different variations of the advertisements that they are creating. And so advertisers used to, maybe make 3 or 4 different versions of an ad, target them at different audiences on the platform, and then put money behind the one that was performing the best. Well, now Meta is allowing you to, instead of test 3 or 4 or 5 different types of ads, you can test dozens and dozens and dozens of slight variations of ads and target them even more closely. And that has actually led to advertisers spending a lot more money on Meta platforms. And so I think where he sees growth is just sort of shoving artificial intelligence down people's throats, whether they like it or not, keeping us in an endless scroll, and creating more and more content that is hyper targeted at people's interests that they can charge higher ad rates for. Whether that is an exciting thing for users or just sort of something that will benefit Meta's bottom line, I mean, you can probably tell where I stand on that.
Right. And I guess the question is there a fear that there is going to be another tech bubble and a crash that comes with it? And because as I said in my previous kind of question to you, is just what else? There's way too much wealth concentrated here for the amount of value that is being provided to people.
Yeah, I mean, there's a race right now. The entire industry is focused on artificial intelligence and a race to create, either a singularity, or I think more likely just find a use case for artificial intelligence that people really like, that is profitable. Because right now, generative AI costs a lot to run. The data centers the compute is really expensive. And even products like ChatGPT that are used by millions and millions of people are wildly unprofitable. And so, I mean, I do think that there's a big bubble right now. I think that the question is whether they'll be able to drive the cost of artificial intelligence down and find a use case for it before that money runs out.
So to turn to kind of your piece on how we can resist and create alternatives to the tech oligarchy, you write about decentralizing social media. Can you talk a little bit about that and explain what that vision might look like for people that want to build alternatives in this moment?
Yeah, so I mean, 10 years ago, you could choose to be on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, and Twitter, and that was kind of your only choice. At this point, there are technologies that are user controlled, decentralized to some extent. You have things like the Fediverse, which runs on Mastodon, which runs on a protocol called ActivityPub, and then you have Blue Sky, which is pretty centralized at the moment, but runs on a protocol called the AT protocol, which is going to allow for decentralization in the future. And what that means is that, let's say, Blue Sky takes a terrible Nazi-like turn at some point. I'm not saying it will happen, but let's say that you build a following on Blue Sky and you decide, I don't want to be here anymore. You can take your following list, you can take, all of the followers that you've accumulated on that platform, and you can port it over to another server. And that server will remain interoperable with all of the people that you've sort of accumulated over time. This technology already exists, and it allows for a lot of user control, and it also allows for a lot of sort of hardening against government censorship, government shutdowns, things like that. The decentralized internet with things like torrents have been around for a really long time, but what people have built on Mastodon is very resilient, is very cool, and most importantly, is not owned by billionaires, is not controlled by billionaires. It is, you can kind of choose your own adventure algorithm-wise, and it's not based on, surveillance capitalism, more or less. What I do say in the piece is that until very recently, joining these social networks has been a little bit difficult. And especially on Mastodon, there has not been a huge user base. And I think part of social media, part of Instagram, part of TikTok is that everyone is there. And like, as Elon Musk has made Twitter and X really bad, there was a mass exodus to Blue Sky. And if you're posting on Blue Sky now, it's like there's tons of people there. There's, you can follow people who are posting about anything you could possibly want. And I think the key to surviving this tech oligarchy is making these platforms easier to join, and also just getting people to use them. I think also things like making a TikTok alternative on an AT protocol or on ActivityPub is a really good idea, and something that hopefully will happen. Making Instagram alternative,
although you wrote about how Meta was blocking links to that Instagram alternative. So it's difficult, I think, for people to even imagine branching out. But as you write, the right wing, online media ecosystem, 4chan, I mean, these are really deep far right kind of corners of the internet. But it's not like they have a massive user base. They built it up over time, and it ended up having a lot of political influence. It's basically kind of the base of Donald Trump's support. It's the Gamergate outgrowth.
Yeah, I mean, there was this idea in the aftermath of the 2016 election and during the 2016 election to some extent that you could ban Nazis and ban far-right people, and they would get deplatformed and they would go somewhere else and they would have a lot less influence. I think it was the correct call to, ban white supremacists and terrorists and things like that. But what they did was they went and built their own platforms. Things like Rumble, Gab, Truth Social, Odyssey, Patriots.win, which is a Reddit alternative. And it's not that there are tons of people on these platforms necessarily. And I'm not saying that they're specifically Nazi platforms or far-right platforms. You choose your experience may vary on these platforms, but what they have been successful at is serving as like a base of ideas that then filtered up into right-wing politics, into places like Fox News, and really like their ideology is mainstream ideology in the United States with the election of Donald Trump. And the left hasn't really had that, hasn't really had these spaces that are
well,
yeah.
The right subsidizes it too. That's the other thing where I think it's just hard somewhat to draw full equivalence, because the right, I Not all of the platforms that you describe, but, Rumble is a Cantor Fitzgerald corporation project. We know that right-wing media is subsidized. We don't have full transparency on this, but what do you make of that power imbalance and financial imbalance?
Yeah, it's not a perfect analogy by any stretch, but I do think that these platforms have been successful at filtering their ideas up into the mainstream. And part of that is because of the funding that you said. Right-wing media is also much better funded than left-wing media. And the mainstream media that people, love to hate on for many, many reasons is far more centrist than one would hope if you were trying to build political power in this country. So it's a very difficult situation, but I do think that decentralizing social media it's just a powerful tool to use against these platforms that are now fully aligned with the Trump administration and are, either going to put their thumb on the scale behind the scenes or, in the case of something like X, in a very public way. And so I think it is important for people to build a following on platforms that can't be controlled as easily.
Absolutely. Well, Jason, really appreciate your time today. Jason Koebler, co-founder of 404 Media. Check out their YouTube channel. Check out their website. All the articles that I referenced, we'll link to that below wherever you're listening to or watching this. Appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking to Nayna Gupta, Policy Director for the American Immigration Council. We are back, and we are joined now by Nayna Gupta, Policy Director for the American Immigration Council. Nayna, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I wanted to start here. The Washington Post had a great article that was written by Arielis R. Hernandez entitled "This Was Cruel: Inside a Border Shelter, Migrants Await Trump's Next Move." I'd really encourage people to read it, but it basically explains this CBP1 app, which was, I guess, part of the Biden administration's program. And we can get into the specifics of that app and your thoughts on it in a second, Nayna. But I just wanted to show this video here that was taken by that same reporter from the Washington Post. It was as right as these people who were trying to come to this country and doing so through the legal mechanisms that were provided to them through this app. This woman, when she found out that she wouldn't be able to come into this country, and I think this is the woman that was profiled who wanted to meet her husband here, who had already come across with this via this app. This was the footage from that facility over in Mexico, right near the border. Just a heartbreaking video. This is the CBP1 app had basically been shut down by the Trump administration just right before she was, I think, so close to getting over here. If you could just speak about what that app was, what the reaction has been to Trump shutting it down unilaterally, and the ramifications of it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Emma, and thank you for playing that video, which offers a very humanizing reality check on what we're talking about in terms of these orders from the Trump administration. So within 20 minutes of the president being sworn in, people like that woman received notice that appointments they had been given by the U.S. government to begin and make a case for asylum, which is, humanitarian relief for people fleeing persecution and danger, that appointment was canceled and no longer existed. And that's because in those first 20 minutes, the Trump administration eliminated the use of this CBP1 app. And what that meant was that there are now 270,000 people approximately who are stranded on the Mexican side of the border, who had either made appointments like the woman that we just watched and were waiting for the chance to make an appointment so that they could present themselves lawfully through a path provided by the government and through this lottery that the CBP1 app created. Now, CBP1, just to take a step back, falls in the context of what has been now several years of action to limit access to asylum for people at the U.S.-Mexico border. So even before January 20th, it was extremely difficult for somebody like this woman, apprehended by a Border Patrol agent, to seek asylum in the United States, even though under the Refugee Act of 1980, they have a lawful right to do that.
And under international law as well, right?
Correct, and under international law. The Biden administration made policy changes that actually made most border crossers ineligible for asylum and subjected them to a restrictive and demanding process to be allowed to stay in the United States to seek any kind of humanitarian relief. But the Biden administration still permitted some migrants to seek asylum if they appeared at a port of entry and got an appointment using this app. There were about 1,400 appointments taken at any given time. And this woman is an example of somebody who followed the rules and followed that process and had an appointment. And in one fell swoop, the Trump administration essentially reneged on that offer from the United States government. And what that means is that there are over 200,000 people near the southern border now who have nowhere to go. And they are in conditions that make them extremely vulnerable to exploitation by cartels, by traffickers, by kidnappers, and particularly for women, vulnerable to violence and sexual violence. And, this president ran on a platform of improving border security. And what this explicitly does within 20 minutes of him being sworn in is to destabilize the US-Mexico border. A border with that many people with nowhere to go is the definition of a border with chaos. That's not stable. And that's a big change from where things were just a few weeks ago, where border crossings were actually the lowest they've been in a long time. And we had this orderly process through the CBP1 app, which, to be clear, was not perfect, but was something promised to people and was, a forward-looking way to modernize our U.S. asylum system and border process.
And this article talks about how some of these people who went through this process waited for 3, 6, 11 months for that coveted appointment. And then in one fell swoop, the Trump administration essentially just canceled it. And as you say, this was the legal process. This is the exact process that if you're not crossing the country illegally, not breaking the law, which is what all of these right wingers were saying, this would be the protocol that you would ascribe to, that you would go about. And you mentioned the modernization of our immigration system. Can you speak a little bit about the alternatives to this just incredibly cruel and militarized vision of immigration policy that, frankly, Biden continued, and Trump is even more gratuitously cruel on that front? But what really seems to me needs to be done is an increase in funding for processing, an increase in staffing for processing, so that people can have appointments, they can come into the country, they can see a judge, they can make their case, and then we can, if the concern is about not having data on these folks, well, that would be an easy way to just modernize that. And also, I would say, not turn away asylum seekers, which is illegal. But the alternative that seemingly both parties right now are committed to is just more militarism and more restriction.
That's right. So, these executive orders that we saw this week in total absolutely militarize the US-Mexico border. And you're right to point out that that is an extremely cruel approach to border management, but it's also incredibly ineffective.
Right.
Using the United States military and its resources to try to stop what is a global trend of increasing migration is not going to work in the long term. What will work is investing in processing tools like a CBP1 app, for example, in ensuring the right kinds of officers who are trained with humanitarian perspectives are at our border, being able to manage the influx of people coming, speeding up our asylum court backlog system to ensure that cases are adjudicated more quickly. Those are real solutions, and they're not, frankly, partisan ones. Those are policy solutions to a challenge, a humanitarian challenge. And because this issue has become so politicized, across the aisle, a lot of elected officials have been are distracted away from the things that actually work. And so, we will see the Trump administration talk about going after criminal immigrants or criminal migrants. I think it's obvious to anybody watching that video, that woman is not a criminal.
Right.
Even the actions these executive orders take on enforcing immigration law in the interior of the United States, are targeted to undocumented immigrants with decades of life here in the US who pose absolutely no public safety threat. That's billions of taxpayer dollars being used to criminalize people who actually help our economy and our communities. And that wasted money and resource is not put toward actually fixing things like lawful pathways that work, visas that last, ensuring that people can be here with legal status so that the contributions they make have broader benefits for all of us. And the Trump administration, has really messaged and marketed this in a way to play upon people's fears, and Americans just have to get smarter.
And you mentioned the cartels earlier. Can you speak about why this empowers them, right? And how this puts people trying to come into this country in a situation where they may pay an exorbitant fee to a cartel to help them get over the border through illegal means or through dangerous means, right? Because if you basically just shut it off, like, is this woman, and again, I'm not sure if I don't think it's the same woman in that video, but one of the women profiled in this piece, she wants to see her husband's already here. She wants to see her husband. There's going to be so many people like that who need to get to the country, but there's no legal mechanism to do it. So they're going to put themselves in incredibly dangerous situations.
Right. So you hit the nail on the head. Most of the people who have traveled the treacherous journey through, for example, the Darien Gap, through multiple countries, who've left their home, they didn't do it just because they wanted to, or because they didn't want to be in their country anymore. Most of them didn't have a choice, either because of the violence or economic destitution they were facing in their home countries, large climate crises, political instability. They didn't have a choice. They've made an incredibly difficult journey to get to the US-Mexico border, and going back is not an option. And that creates an opportunity, an incentive for cartels and traffickers to say to people, if you pay us this amount of money, or if you do this thing for us, or if you don't do this, we will kidnap you and punish you in this way. It gives them an opportunity to exploit these folks, to say, look, we'll help you get over the border if you pay us this much. If you don't get money from your loved one in the United States and pay us, we'll kill you, because we control the land that you're stranded in right now. There isn't a meaningful United Nations or humanitarian organization presence on that side of the border. There are organizations who try their best, but who cannot serve those needs. Those are people who we know in the past have been subjected to all kinds of violence. Women in particular, as I mentioned, being subjected to sexual violence at the hands of smugglers or cartels. And this is only going to exacerbate that humanitarian crisis. And it's going to make people desperate to find ways to get across the border, because they want to escape that lack of safety. They want to get to loved ones they've been trying to reach, and they can't go home. And just ignoring the humanitarian problem isn't going to make things easier for the United States. It's not going to make things better for border communities. It's not going to make us safer or more secure at the US-Mexico border.
And you talk about the desperation. I think that's such a key word in so many areas when we talk about immigration, because I think one of the other things that isn't talked about enough is how there are many people, employers, capitalists in this country, that like the idea of a population being both desperate and also more easily exploitable on their end. So it's not just the cartels, right? And I do think that, and I wonder if you share this view, that there are some folks in this country that like the idea of having deportation as a disciplinary force that they can use against their workforce, that may be here without undocumentation, or cutting their wages to a starvation level, to sub-minimum wage. Well, what are you going to do about it? I'll call ICE. Like, that does to me, at the very least, and I'm wondering if you have heard this as a part of people's experiences, feel like a big part of the motivation for many conservatives to have the state operate in this way against a population that, isn't here in a documented way.
Look, I can't speak to the motivations of various politicians and policymakers, but you are absolutely correct that these executive orders by criminalizing the 13 million undocumented immigrants who live here, by putting a target on their back, even though the vast majority pose absolutely no public safety threat. By doing that, what the Trump administration is saying is, even if we can't round up all of these people, the mere threat of that, one, has a chilling effect in those communities because people are so scared. But second, it makes those people extremely vulnerable to abuse from employers who can say, look, if you don't do what we tell you, we'll report you to the Trump administration because we know that they've already criminalized your existence here. That means that worker is even more powerless now than before to speak up for their rights. And it's worth saying here that, first of all, the 13 million undocumented people who live here, fewer than 1 in 10 even have a criminal record. And of the people who do, most of those folks have records for traffic offenses or immigration-related violations. They are not a threat to any of us. One thing a lot of Americans don't realize is that undocumented immigrants pay taxes. They contribute over $40 billion in federal taxes every year. Another $29 billion in state and local taxes. They fill key essential sectors of our labor market. They raise U.S. citizen children. They love U.S. citizen spouses. Criminalizing them, rather than talking about pathways to legalization, which are overdue for those people, puts them in an extremely vulnerable place and will absolutely affect all of us. It will affect our grocery prices. It will affect housing costs. We will see the impact right away, in Southern California, where the Trump administration already has started doing raids in farm worker communities. There's plenty of reporting about how folks are not showing up to work. The fields are empty because they're scared for themselves. That hurts all of us, in addition to being cruel and violative of human rights. And so, ultimately, the question will be, how far will the American public and members of Congress let the Trump administration go down this path of mass deportation and threat? And at what point will we say, we have benefited from these people for so long, we now must offer them legalization. We must offer them a pathway to citizenship so that in the future, they are not at risk to this kind of abuse and exploitation.
Yeah, the Democrats need to provide an alternative vision here. That's a huge part of this, right? Because my last question to you, I know you have to run, is on this Lake and Riley Act, which, I think 48 Democrats in the House just signed on to it, which basically it just says if you're accused of a crime and you are here and you are not like a full United States citizen by this point, we can just deport you. We can just deport you just for being charged. And this sets up a very scary situation for those 13 million people that you talk about here, because it could just be like, your neighbor doesn't like you. Okay, I'm going to accuse you of committing this crime. And that's all that needs to happen before that person can be deported. And 48 Democrats, this is about to be signed into law by Trump, just signed on to this horrific legislation.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. The Lake and Riley Act is a harmful bill that will serve as an engine for mass deportation. It absolutely adds chaos to the U.S. immigration system. It also gives state attorneys general the power to go to federal court to change large areas of immigration policy. And it absolutely will not provide any kind of public safety. In fact, it's likely to detract from public safety. It forces immigration officials to focus their resources on people who do not pose a threat, to use detention beds for people like that, rather than focusing on what should be their priority, and actually focusing on people who might pose some kind of threat to safety. I think what's happened is that a lot of politicians have taken this election to be a mandate on an anti-immigrant extreme agenda. What we know from the polling that we've done and we've looked at is that what Americans want are sensible, effective, efficient, humane solutions to the broken immigration system. They don't want extreme bills like the Lake and Riley Act. They want dollars to be used in smart and effective ways that honor the contributions that immigrants have made. And the message that elected officials on both sides of the aisle have taken from the election is misguided, frankly. And it really will be up to those who have stood up to bills like the Laken Riley Act, who are more attuned to what people are saying on the ground, to remind those elected officials that you can honor what the American people want without going to this extreme of cruelty, and that there is an affirmative vision that allows us to have consequences for people who break the law without violating our founding principles as a country and violating basic rights and making a mess of a system in a way that doesn't help any of us.
Well, I really appreciate your time today. Nayna Gupta, Policy Director for the American Immigration Council. Thanks so much for breaking that all down for us.
Thanks so much, Emma. Take care.
Thanks. You too. All right, with that, we're going to wrap up the free part of this program and head into the fun half. I did just want to read this IM really quickly because I hadn't seen the Oscar nominations this morning. Sent with Laser says, I know you guys never talk about documentaries for some weird reason. All right, well, you're a little salty, but No Other Land, a wonderful recent doc about Palestine, just got nominated for an Academy Award, which I hadn't seen. And so that's phenomenal.
That's courtesy of Yuval Abraham and Basil Adra, who we had on the show just before he was detained by Israeli forces and then ultimately released. And also,
right.
And Basil has also been on Left Reckoning as well.
Yes. So incredible. I hope they win. And everybody should check out No Other Land.
Yeah, not good enough just to be nominated. You gotta make that win, folks. Then I'll start caring about your awards ceremonies.
Right. And please do not let Amelia Perez win one award. We could get into that.
Who's that?
It is a film by a French director with no Mexican people as the leads, but it takes place in Mexico. And
so it's like Dune of Mexico?
And it's a musical. And it's about a drug cartel kingpin who transitions into a woman. And it's set to musical, and it's being criticized by people who are actually from Mexico as like deeply offensive. But it's like so Oscar baity because it includes a transition, and I don't know. It's considered one of like the worst kind of Oscar favorites in quite a while, since maybe Green Book, which also had its own massive issues.
Speaking of Oscar favorites, I don't want to get too deep into specifics, but I accidentally spoiled Conclave for.
You did, but I just saw. Wait, did Oh yeah, you did just accidentally spoil Conclave for me. I do want to see that. I need to see Conclave. I need to see Nosferatu. But last night I actually did see Baby Girl, which was amazing. Nicole Kidman. Did she get nominated? I hope she did. Anyway.
Maybe my swipe at Dune was unfair. I haven't seen those movies, but I did see people point out that they seem to take place in the Middle East and it's all Europeans. But maybe that's
although Dune 2, I would say when I first saw Dune 2, I was I thought it had a very anti-genocide message in it that was almost a little eerie given like what has been happening. But I love Dune 2. But anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole or rambling. It's your support that makes the show possible. Join themajorityreport.com. If you would like to support this program, you can IM the show that way. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning? That's not Matt. That's Brandon.
Actually, Brandon, you went first.
Yes.
I wish I was as tall as Matt, right? Matt's like 6'7". He should be balling.
I'm 6'2". If I was 6'7", I'd be,
That's Baron. You'd be Baron
going
Trump.
Into the Hall of Fame of the NBA right now.
All right.
Play for the Knicks.
Matt really thinks he has the skill level.
I just had and my wingspan was 6'9", and not like 6 flat.
That's true. That's all that's keeping me from being in the NBA too. Just like height. It's a height issue. There's nothing else going on.
Yeah. No, I always thought I'd make a great NFL quarterback if every single thing about my body was different. So and perhaps my gender. But anyway.
Do you imagine playing quarterback sometimes?
Truly that was like I have like little fantasies about if I were a guy, I would love to play quarterback. I just love that the cerebral part of that position and how hard it is and all the tactical parts of it.
I tried to play quarterback back in the day, and it's hard to take the snap.
Yeah. Yeah. And then read the defense as like all those guys are running straight at you.
I'm just happy I got the ball from the center.
Handing it off. My fiance used to be a quarterback, so I've seen some of his old film. That's all I get in terms of vicarious fantasy. He was a dual threat.
Vicarious nostalgia.
He was a dual threat. What's up, Brandon? How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm also a dual threat in the sense that I have a stream coming up tomorrow. There's stream on the Discourse YouTube and Twitch channel. It's been having a lot of fun. I've been telling my fans, I've been very gracious. I've been telling the people watching the stream that if we get up to 10,000 followers on the YouTube channel, I'm going to end anti-white racism. Trump promised he'd do that. He's not going to follow through. But I promise that I might do it if we get up to 10,000 followers on the YouTube channel. I'm generous. Combined channels, we get up to 10,000 followers. We're going to end anti-white racism. And then we also have a podcast coming out where we talk about what Biden's legacy is going to be and what Trump is, what you would expect from Trump over the next 4 years. That'll be up on the SoundCloud and Patreon. So much content. There's so much content. Consume.
Love content. And the Discourse, you definitely check it out. I've tuned into your streams before. It's really good. So people should check it out. Always love to hear more from you. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Yeah, Left Reckoning, Abdelhalim Abdelrahman on to talk about Gaza and the assault on the West Bank now and the failure of the Democrats. Coming up, Asal Rad talking about Iran and probably all sorts of foreign policy stuff again. And Grace Blakely of the Tribune talking about vulture capitalism.
All right. On ESPN today, Bradley and I will be talking about the divisional round. We'll talk a little bit about those games and then previewing the conference championships, giving our picks, youtube.com/ESPN show. Is Binder here? No, not yet. Check out the Discourse, check out Leftist Mafia, all of his shows. All right, guys, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the majority report.
Wait, look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset?
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and...
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. We shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour,
wow.
Sushi. I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid.
I had this debate 7,000 times.
A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour. I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but like,
I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job.
Tour? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. Willy Wonka tour? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
That offered a tour?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's
poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion. Real thing. That's
poker with the boys. That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's
poker.
Let's go, Joey.
Tour? Sushi and poker with the boys.
Take it easy, buddy.
Tour, Sushi and poker.
Things have really gotten out of hand.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Delusional.
Deluded.
Sushi.
You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sam doesn't want to do this show anymore. It was so much easier when the Majority Report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Right.
Rangers and Knicks doing great.
Now, shut up. You don't want people saying reckless things on your program.
That's one of the most difficult parts about this show.
This is a pro-killing podcast.
I'm thinking maybe it's time we bury the hatchet.
Left is best. Ultraviolet.
Don't be foolish, and don't fucking tweet at me, and don't bitch. The way Emma has cucked all of these people, love it.
That's where my heart is, so I wrote my honors thesis about it.
Oh, she wrote an honest thesis. I guess I should hand the main mic to you now.
You are to the right of me on foreign policy.
We already fund Israel, dude. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I have an answer to.
Incredible theme song.
Hi, Bumbler.
Emma Vigeland, absolutely one of my favorite people. Actually, not just in the game, like period.
3, 2, and back.
We are back, and we do have Matt Binder in just a second, but I'm going to open up the phone lines, 646-257-3920. Hey, it's Matt Binder. Hello.
Hello. How are you? What a wonderful week it's been.
I mean, it really, we had Monday off, and then I was out sick Tuesday, and it still feels like a long week. So what's happening on your shows, Binder?
Sure. So Doomed is back. I've brought back Doomed after a short break. Did a show on Monday night, the day of the inauguration, and went over all of that. I think most of it is, if you listen to it or watch it today, it's he did most of the things that day so far.
Yeah,
it's been a bizarrely, in terms of comparatively, a slow past 2 days after that first. The inauguration day, because yesterday was really full day one. A little bit too quiet, one of those situations, wondering what's going on there. And Scam Economy will also be back very shortly too. That's the one that everyone's been asking me for again, because we are really, you thought we were living in the age of the grift before. I think we are in the golden age.
Golden age of grift.
The grift empire now. Like it is bad right now.
Yeah. Fantastic Moron says the first Dune book is based on the first Palestinian genocide following the Nakba. Frank Herbert spent years as a political journalist in the 50s in the Middle East countries and spent a lot of time with the Bedouins. Then the next books are about the consequences of white savior and Western chauvinism. It's a great read. I've read the first Dune book. It's like the politics of it are very good, I think. But I remember seeing Dune 2, and then I all I could think about was Gaza at that time, but it was like it was eerie almost how much it represented like that slaughter at the time when it came out in March. Gooberville, a copy of If I Must Die by Rafat Al-Arir has finally shipped. Can't wait to open it up. Thanks for the recommendation, y'all. That's great. Retro the Robot, unfollowing Brandon to keep the white man down.
You hate to see it. Division. What would Obama say?
Evan from Portland said Dune is absolutely an allegory to Palestine. A greedy empire rules over a desert people through a brutal proxy, but suppresses elite troops and supplies elite troops and equipment. The heroes incite rebellion against unjust repression. Yep.
It definitely is. And I've noticed myself noticing things like that a lot more too. And then I sometimes catch myself remembering it's like sometimes these things seem so relevant, not just because they're written about specific events, like inspiring them, but because these things are happening so frequently all over the world. And so like a lot of times they just, you'll watch something from the 1980s about like, you'll watch They Live, right? And see, this could have been made yesterday. You'll rewatch like the Boondocks cartoon show from the early 2000s. You're like, wow, this is like prophetic. And a lot of things have just been happening for a very long time. And now we're living in the age of like mass information, like accessible to everyone at the drop of a hat. Like I think a lot more people are realizing that they're able to like draw a through line through history a lot better than previous generations who had it like robbed from them.
Right, yeah, and people are mentioning that No Other Land got this Oscar nomination, which is great. I saw that if people are looking into the Oscar race, which I kind of am, or just at least the movies that come out that are like nominated, The Brutalist is about Zionism, like one of the many themes, like directly so. It's I wasn't expecting it when I saw the film, which was excellent, and the director Brady Corbet was talking about No Other Land and promoting it. And there was a lot of ambiguity. Zionists took that it was pro-Zionist film, and right-wingers can't interpret art, so I'm not shocked by that. But in case there was any ambiguity about where that director stood, I do think his praise for No Other Land and saying how it shouldn't be censored kind of makes that clear. But Adamant Left, he says, Senator Whitehouse had a great moment where he called Vought out on deciding which questions to answer and which he chose not to answer, creating the appearance of some legal privilege that doesn't exist to get out of answering questions about executive orders. We'll check that out. Tom Cotton's Beard. I'm about 90% through training for my private pilot's license. ATC getting privatized will cause massive damage. Pilots also rely on government weather services. Privatizing those services will decimate safety standards. Before every flight, I get a weather brief for free, which is a key safety procedure. Pilots will just skirt weather briefings if they have to pay for it every time. I mean, 100%. Absolutely. We see when the government shuts down, the safety issues that occur because of like the air traffic control and flight attendants, like the unions, will often refuse to even fly because it's not it's unsafe without the government functioning fully to be able to monitor those safety standards. Kirby, I didn't think Tim Kaine had this in him. I guess we had two Democratic VP picks muzzled by the party.
I mean, Tim Kaine's always had a little bit of sauce. He famously was one of the Democrats that didn't show up when Bibi came to
Netanyahu,
talk in like 2015 or 14.
Man Shovel said, this is essentially a job interview, and everyone knows your work history is going to come up during a job interview. These freaks don't believe they're subject to the same rules and standards that the rest of us are subject to. Good on Tim Kaine for slapping the student down, little spineless scumbag. Obvious Book says, Brandon is killing it on YouTube. Love his stream. There you go.
Oh, yeah. I see him in my stream all the time. A lot of good contributions. I love when people have good contributions to my stream. It takes the pressure off me.
Yes. That it really is great. People should check out the discourse. Goonish Lurker, I'm getting paid to sit and supervise some vendors, but I get to listen to the Thursday edition of the Majority Report, so this makes my day more tolerable. Love the Thursday crew. Well, thank you, Goonish Lurker. We'll take a call and then we'll do a clip here. Just because I just opened up the phone lines. Calling from a 603 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is it me?
This is you.
Hey, pretty cool. I'm calling mostly to complain.
Sure. Complainer, could you give your name and where you're from?
Oh, yes. Sorry. This is Allie from New Hampshire.
Allie from New Hampshire. Complain away.
Yes. Yeah. So Twitter is a cesspool. You know, we all know that. I don't even know why I'm going on anymore, but it's just been really frustrating for me to see people on like my own community Facebook pages and just Twitter and stuff, just like still blindly supporting Trump. Like, I know it's a cult. I know they're not going to ever challenge anything he does, but we have seen so many objectively bad things, like, you know, withdrawing from WHO and, the Paris Climate Agreement, and then, just stopping the $35 insulin caps. And it's just like, these are things that are going to affect his base directly and then the world globally. And it's like, yeah, this is exactly what we wanted. And I've seen so many comments, people posting being like, is this really what you wanted? And then I'm just so shocked by so many people being like, yes, this is what I want and this is what I support. And it's just so frustrating to see people not only supporting it, but like leaning into it and just excusing away all of it. And I just kind of like to get your take on it.
Sure. Well, I'll say right now the right wing is feeling themselves, so they're going to be more vocal. A lot of times they cow or they talk in code or they don't say how they really feel publicly, but behind the scenes, like they're saying racial slurs or about how much they enjoy seeing that woman. I mean, the reactions I saw in particular to that clip we played with our guest of the woman who, right after she was denied basically entry to the country after waiting for such a long period of time, the right-wing reaction was like, good, love her tears, love to see it. Like, and the level of cruelty is difficult, I think, to even like stomach or look at, right? And you're just like, Jesus, is this who they are? Because it is. But just they act that way because they're bullies when they've won, right? So this is going to be a period, specifically in the first 100 days of Trump, before perhaps some opposition begins to build, where they are going to be as insufferable as humanly possible because they are feeling themselves. But at the end, it is revealing because the cruelty is something that they get off on. The fact that they got to see that woman crying, it makes them happy. And we should be clear-eyed about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I didn't even want to look at comments on like some of the things I don't look at comments because I know it's going to be people cheering for the suffering of others. And I don't get that. And it also just seems really stupid that like realistically their whole ideology is just to own the libs. It's like, okay, great. You feel superior, but like you're going to get fucked. Oh, sorry about like everyone else as well. So what's the point?
The point is that like that is what motivates their politics. And there will always be a section of the population that enjoys that kind of cruelty. But there are also folks that voted for Trump that maybe didn't understand this full crackdown. And those are not going to be the people you're seeing dunking on folks on Twitter. But those are the folks that we have to focus on turning. And
partisan accounts on social media are going to do what they do, frankly. But Trump didn't win. The totality of his votes are not all those type of people. There are plenty of people who thought like, okay, for whatever reason, like they voted for Trump, thought like, I haven't seen anything happen for me in terms of like my economic prosperity over the past few years or whatever. There's plenty, and that needs to be drawn out. Like, because I think there's plenty of Nazis who supported, say, Trump because of, kick them all out. I think there's a lot of people who bought the idea because, frankly, the Democrats were echoing it, that there's a problem with how many people are crossing the border that's leading to hurting people's pocketbooks and their ability to find shelter. And that's not going to be addressed. And so what we have to do, I think, is really sort of point out to people the amount of money being spent on this boondoggle on the southern border and how it's not actually addressing any of the good concerns that were being projected toward it. And the Nazis can be told to kick rocks.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. My main worry is just that I feel like for so many of these people, and like full disclosure, I grew up in a very conservative household. Like I don't speak to my parents anymore. They were abusive, but like my mom frequently used the N-word. Like that's like what I grew up with. And I think my parents are those type of like conservatives who are like, oh, it's all about taxes or whatever. But like my sister is special needs and like needs those like state resources and stuff. And it's like, so, you're being so selfish and racist, and it's like, it's going to affect your daughter. And I think it's really sad. And I think for a lot of people, it's like, until it directly affects them, they just don't care. And I think that's really sad that people can't have empathy for others.
I hear
you
on that.
That's like the major issue right now. Like that's the thing.
That's learned behavior. That's like taught behavior though. Like people, at some point people are taught to mediate their own economic conditions through the influx of immigrants over the southern border, which are, not directly causative, obviously, of their waning material conditions.
Right.
Like, it's not like people who, with like hardcore anti-immigration stances are new. They've been around for